You have found To All the Cars I've Loved Before, your authoritative podcast on automotive nostalgia, where every car tells a story, every machine has a soul, every car has a culture. It's time to plug in, dust off, get a little grease on the hands, and memories in the mind. Welcome to new listeners. Oslo, Norway, Salt Lake City, Utah, North Liberty, Iowa, Ashburn, Virginia, close to Doug. Okay, I love saying this one. Etobicoke, Ontario. I think I got it. Does that sound good? Does that sound right?
You got it perfect. Nailed it first time.
Where else? Dallas, Texas. Easy one to say. Reykjavik, Iceland. That's in there. Reykjavik. Miami, Florida, and Allentown, Pennsylvania. Allentown, a great song by Billy Joel. I am Christian. He is Doug. Good evening, partner. How are you?
Doing great.
Christian
Great to be back
at
here with
carslove.com. That's right. Christian at carslove.com. He's Doug at carslove.com. And we have a really special guest today. Can't wait to introduce him. Today's theme, restoring history. Why are details important when restoring history? When restoring a vintage car, a vintage Ferrari, or a vintage church built about 800 years ago? We'll get into that in just a moment. So get into calls to action here real quick. We continue to see traffic movement on our link tree, linktr.ee/Cars Loved. That's where you can get to all our online presences. So Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Where else, partner? Where else are we?
Our website, our blog, our form to submit yourself or a friend to be a guest on the show.
Absolutely. We also started a newsletter of which I wrote the first edition, and it's sitting in my editor-in-chief's inbox. Right, editor-in-chief?
It's still there.
It hasn't been forgotten. It's just been ignored. Beautiful.
Indeed.
So what else is going on with our outreach efforts here? Anything new going on? I know the YouTube still getting traffic there, yeah?
Yeah. YouTube, we've been having fun with YouTube Shorts. We did put out an entire YouTube episode with Speedy Cop, a.k.a. Jeff Block, great friend of the show, amazing guy. We'll have the full audio episode out in a few weeks, I think, by the time people listen to this. And let's see, been updating the blog. And on that note, Christian, I've shared in the past that cars that are important to me, of which I own now, I have a 1990 Nissan 300ZX Z32. It was not the car I had in high school, but it was the car I wanted. A close friend of mine who's no longer with us had one. He really got me into cars, so that car is special to me. It's about 5 different colors because it got hit a bunch of times, so it needs to be painted. And then, of course, the 1981 DeLorean, which can't say enough great things about it. I've made great friends. I've taken it to events, made people smile. People laugh and point and smile when I'm going down the road. And I've done so many things with it. I've taken the interior out. I just replaced the fuel injectors pretty much myself on a very antiquated mechanical fuel injection system by Bosch. And the car is running better now. So everything I've fixed, nothing has broken permanently. It's all fixable, and it's the gift that keeps giving. So what about yourself, Christian? Tell us about
we were just chatting about how I banged up my vintage Pontiac. Little painful. Want to talk about that
Pontiac Solstice, 2007 green.
A lot of fun.
Loved
fun. We've been interviewing a lot of people about air-cooled VWs, vintage VWs, and I'm thinking a lot about it. It wasn't air-cooled, but my VW Rabbit GTI 1984 from the 80s. That car was so much fun. So much fun in there. High school and into college, just piling great people into it, going to have fun. Very sporty car. And yeah, I think I need to. I'm looking at the new ones online. I just don't think there are many old ones there to be had. But
they're out there. They're out there. Do you want me to look for you?
Yeah, please do. And if you get sick of the 300ZX in your garage, Doug, just box it up and send it down. We'll
Okay.
take it.
We'll park it
Yeah,
right next to the boat that I gave you.
that's right. It's on the list too. It's on
Yep.
the list too.
I'm just
All
joking.
right. Moving on. Okay, we have a great guest here today, but before we introduce him, a little prologue, a little preamble. There's a through line. Bear with me for just a moment. Today's theme: restoring history. Why do historical details matter? Well, about a week ago, I was watching a documentary about the Cathedral of Notre Dame. Okay, burned down 2019, just reopened it, and I sat down to watch this, and I thought, they're going to bring everything up to code: steel trusses, titanium struts, this and that. When they're rebuilding the church, especially the spire that fell, all that had to be fixed. It's not the case. That's not what happened at all. They found these Parisian artisans and sent them all out in France and said, you got to find a certain kind of oak, certain kind of height, certain kind of diameter. You're going to bring it to these sawmills. And all these sawmills around France pitched in free. Okay. Started milling the oak down, sending it back to Paris. So it was not the latest technology. It was the original technology. Church was built 800 years ago and still use these old techniques to fix it. And so there's a through line in preparing for today's show. Our guest is Tom Young, who restores vintage Ferraris. Same thing. Okay. And we're going to get into that. But Tom, good evening, good afternoon. How are you? Welcome to the show.
Hi. Thanks for having me, guys.
What did you, have you know anything about Notre Dame, or do you remember it burning?
Yes, actually, I was in Paris before the fire. So it was when we heard about the fire, it was just so upsetting because it was just, I think it was only about 6 months prior to that we were there. So
wow.
But again, it's just heartbreaking when the whole world saw the video of that collapse. And
That's right.
It seemed like it was just, it was beyond repair. I mean, it was just a catastrophic failure and fire.
That's right. That's right. And it was kind of the heartbeat of the city. And what there are people that are religious, not religious, people from outside of the country, outside of the city, money just poured in. It didn't matter what stripe you were. It was that important to the city, rebuilding it and getting the historical details right. So,
and in New York, we have a cathedral that's been still being put together, so it's just as the artisans are learning how to do these Gothic cathedrals, it's like when you think about that Notre Dame has been around for so long and then it has to be rebuilt again. And I totally agree that you'd think that they would do it with modern materials, but no, absolutely. You have to preserve the original. I mean, for it to survive so many hundreds of years, there's nothing wrong with the way it was originally built,
Well put.
So
that's exactly right. Is that St. John the Divine, by the way, that you're referring to?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And because of the price of it, it may never be finished.
May never, right.
because it takes so long. But Tom, please tell us a little bit about what you do and how you fell into it.
So I guess I'm a mechanic. I'm a mechanic on vintage Ferraris. And I usually, when I first meet people, I tell people I work on pre-72 Ferraris, anything built before pre-72. And people say, well, what's the cutoff at 72? And I usually say it's carbureted. I like working on carbureted Ferraris. So pre-72, most of them were V12 engines. And they were kind of classified as vintage Ferrari. Although vintage keeps moving, the goalposts keep moving. Now, a Testarossa built in the 80s is considered vintage.
Yes, it is.
And all those things. So I guess at some point, do we start calling them classic Ferraris? But so that's kind of what I do. I started, I guess a lot of us started because we just fell in love with a car. I was always a car guy. So ever since I was a teenager, I've had cars, but when I saw Ferrari for the first time, I just said, okay, what I think is cool about all these other cars that I have and own and all, I don't know anything that's going on with vintage Ferrari, and I've got to learn everything about it because just the beautiful shape. The first one that I saw in person was a 250 short wheelbase, which is kind of a high watermark to kind of surpass. And I just couldn't believe how beautiful it was. It was so low and the shape. And then once they fired up the engine, it was like, I never heard a 12-cylinder Ferrari engine. I mean, just running like that just sounded so like just
What did it
menacing and
sound
beautiful.
like? Oh, that did you
It's
say menacing
It's
and
like,
beautiful?
yeah, I mean, like
Oh, wow.
when you get this Ferrari, it's like it's a a Ferrari is beautiful. It's like I used to joke about it. Like, okay, so let's go back to the story, right? So I meet my mentor at his shop. That's the first introduction. So my mentor's name is Francois Sicard. He is a fairly well-known Ferrari restorer in the 70s and 80s. He worked for Canetti Motors, which is the story of Ferrari coming to America and establishing a foothold and dealer in America. And Francois worked for Canetti, so he learned all the ways of putting Ferraris together. Apprenticed at the factory in the 60s, came to America and started his career at Ferrari. So by the time I met him in the late 90s, he was fairly well known, and I was introduced to him at a shop, and he had this short wheelbase, and I remember it was under a cover, like like a Gaussian cover, and as he pulled the cover off, it almost felt like you were lifting a skirt because it was like the fender is basically this beautiful feminine shape, and I almost made the epiphany where it's like, oh, these sneaky Italians, they're just forming these Rubenesque shapes of sculpture. But then you take that and you're kind of like, okay, so that's why all these dudes like these cars. And then all of a sudden you go and fire it up, and it's got this like mechanical anger and fury and
Wow.
just like I'm ready to go. And you just basically meld this attraction. Like, look at these guys who ride choppers, and they have this big tank in front of them, and they're riding. Like, think of all that like subconscious stuff that they're doing, right? So it's the same thing. It's like, and you put all the power to it, and the noise and the vibration. So that's kind of like my wow. This is really cool. And so I made that decision. I said, I don't know how I'm gonna get one, but I gotta get one of these things. And
You made it.
And I made it. I found one, and just kind of looking back, and I guess if it hadn't been that meeting, that chance meeting, I may have gone another direction. But it was pretty wild how my whole life changed course because of that one epiphany.
Right.
And required reading for this journey is Tom's website, tomyoung.net, TOMYANG.net. So he's got so much information. Started about 25 years ago as a collection for Tom's writings, podcasting, interview, pictures, stories, his life journeys. When he got his car, it really changed his life. And can you talk a little bit about how continuing to put everything in one place became this sort of clearinghouse for great information? But that first part, second part is, do you still update it to this day?
Sure. I still do it. I think, I started blogging before they were called blogs. So in 1999, my nephew was a computer science major in college, and I had him write this script so that I could actually, how do I do this? So I could get pictures and put it in there, and I could just fill the type in, and he created this little script. And we created this script before there was blogging software. So in 1999, that really didn't exist. But I didn't start it to think of what a blog was or anything. It was just this thing called the World Wide Web that had picked your place you could put pictures and stories. And I was learning so much from this mentor. I was learning so much from Francois, and he was so generous to share all this information. And I was just blown over by the coolness of the insides of an engine or a transmission, or how I was just beautiful stuff. And I really was so excited to share it. And I was photographing it, and digital photography was also getting affordable and accessible to all of us with digital cameras. So I just wanted a place to put it, even if it was just for my own collection of photography and talking about how cool it was. But then I found that people all over the world were interested in the same thing. And I would find things like, especially with Ferrari, because all cars are fun, and watch the journey, because I watch YouTube channels. I have a YouTube channel. I look at other people's journey and how they start and how they fix it and they succeed. There's some real journey of success stories of people doing that, and it's all like human triumph and all so this stuff. So there's a lot of reasons why we watch this stuff. But also for me, the Ferrari stuff, I used to say there's a million websites to show you what a color, what their favorite color Ferrari is, but there's nobody that shows you the hammer marks on the bottom side of the fenders that was done by a craftsman 50, 60 years ago. And those marks are still there. It's kind of like what you're saying with Notre Dame. It's like when they recreate those beams, those hand-hewn marks in the beams, although destroyed, that craftsmanship still exists as an artifact of that person's work. He may be gone and forgotten, but his mark on the world is still there, and it's your duty to preserve that. And so for me, not sounding hokey about all this stuff, but I wanted to celebrate those hammer marks, because it's like, this guy's gone, but he in this, in Maranello or in Modena, was in there with a little hammer, hammering out this stump or hammering out this fender, and those marks are still there. And even something as pedestrian as my car, which is it's a 330, this red one behind me, I could take the panels off and you could look underneath it, and those little hammer marks are still there. Pretty cool. And modern cars, when they just stamp another one and boom, it's another stamp, another one, boom, it really doesn't have that like allure to just this hand-hewn piece, so it's
so well stated. Yeah, so well stated. I know Doug wants to hop in here, but interesting you say, we really take for granted that the modern contrivances all around us are all made by mass production, right? Assembly. I visited a Hyundai factory in Montgomery, took my kids, completely amazing place. And, there is an assembly moving very slowly, and people are kind of crawling in there and assembling this and assembling that. And you just watch as this whole thing kind of no art to it. It's completely a business. It's complete. But that's how, in this day and age, we get these amazing machines brought to us for some sort of reasonable price. Let's bring Doug in. Doug, you wanted to get involved here.
Yeah, no, just to thinking about the hammer marks and whatnot, and I'll tie it into my DeLorean, because that's what I have to tie it into. So in the DeLorean world, we have what we call cave art. And so that's where whoever was working on the car that particular day, behind a panel, on the inside of a panel, on the inside of the stainless steel door, they might have signed their name on it with the date. And my car has some of those. I was nice enough to let my kids go ahead and take, not on the panel itself, but just on the inside of the interior part. And we all signed our names on there and put the date on it. So some future owner will get to see it, but it's so neat. And some owners have found even original tools from the factories in the factory in Ireland. So, I mean, that nostalgia, it kind of never goes away. And
and the history of DeLorean is really neat, because when you think about how much excitement there was, I remember when John DeLorean was going to create that car, and they had created the factory in Ireland, and all that it was going to bring all that workmen,
jobs.
And jobs and everything, and there was so much excitement. Unfortunately, it went the way that it went, but at the same time, the history is so rich of that when you think about seeing hand signed, because that hand signing of pieces from people who worked at the factory was part of that wave of excitement and new beginnings of a factory to build this wonderful car that they had put together.
Yeah, and it was a social experiment, right? Protestants and Catholics working together during the Troubles. They had separate entrances, but inside they worked together side by side. It was, would have been great if it worked out, but I know after we spoke to Kat DeLorean, John's daughter, and he loved the Irish people, and what a great experiment that was, and it lives on to this day. Just like your 1963 Ferrari 330 America.
No, but I think all cars have that. They all have that great history. I mean, I think that every one of them, talk about the culture. We talked about it earlier. It's each car represents the culture. It represents art. It represents, the times. It's not, some people look at us car guys and they're just like, oh, what's the big deal about cars? It's just, people look at them as appliances, or they just get them to work. It's like, no, it's a lot more than that. There's art, there's history, there's manufacturing, there's engineering, there's design, there's so much to it. And it's all wrapped up in one thing. And you can drive to the store in it, but at the same time,
it's very usable.
Or you could just stare at it. Right. And walk around it and find something new. And, I wanted to ask you, as a vintage restorer, how do you, and I saw this post the other day from you on, I want to say it was Facebook. I think you were looking for a glass glass cover for a light.
Sure.
And somebody said, "Why don't you just 3D print it?" And I think your response was, "No, that won't work for this."
No.
How do you balance?
I think that there's certain things that you can do in 3D printing, but I also think that 3D printing is not the end all. People have this idea that you just scan it, print it, hit return, and it spits them out. It's not really that. It still creates a lot more finesse to do something like that. But for me, it's like I don't know if I put the video up because I do so much different media for different things, but and I may not have been out there yet, but when I took the glass piece apart and you take a little screwdriver and you just go clink, 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 it's glass.
Yes. Yep. I heard that.
If you made it in print, it doesn't have that sound. And like, if you know what you're looking at, it's like, wow, you get disappointed. It's like seeing somebody with a fake Rolex. It's like, oh, nice watch. And you look at it and the watch ticks. Oh, it's like disappointment because it's a fake. It's like you want real. There's certain things that you can just be assured that it's real. And it's the little tells that if you're around this stuff long enough, like I know watch guys can tell a watch from across the room. And why would I want to fool those guys, or like a guy who could look at a car like my friends who are into Ferraris, we stand at a show field from literally across the field and says, oh my God. And we all know exactly what we're looking at, that's wrong.
Sore thumb.
So how do you balance, speaking of these old parts and, things from the factory that maybe weren't quite done right. I mean, my car has 1,000 examples of that.
Sure.
When you're doing a restoration, right? Do you try and make it as good as new, a little bit better? I think it's probably varying degrees.
It's coming back. I mean, I used to blame, and I hope he doesn't get mad at me, but I used to blame Ralph Lauren because Ralph Lauren was, every generation has like the new guy that makes so much money he's willing to overpay. We had John Shirley. We had, like when Microsoft, made them. Well, when Ralph Lauren made a lot of money and he was ready to buy, he set the new tone, the new standard for how much money he would pay for a Ferrari because he could afford it. Then when John Shirley came around and he paid what? And I remember talking to John Shirley at one point where the next level of guys, the next level of cars were called, and John Shirley, I'm never going to pay that kind of money for that car, but he was the guy who overpaid like 10 years prior to that. So each generation kind of gets to these guys. And so what happened with Ralph Lauren was when he got a car, he just said, I want it to be done to my level of standard. So he had them restored to the point where his car showed up at a car show and it just knocked everybody's socks off. I mean, the paint was flawless, the chrome was flawless, everything was like perfect because that's the standard that he had. Then what happened was the show field says, oh, Jesus, if I'm supposed to compete with that, my car needs to be at least as good as Ralph Lauren's. And it kind of set through the 80s that they were over-restoring. And it was just this arms race of over-restoration until at some point, people just kind of started to appreciate original cars. And we sort of say, well, that's not how they originally looked like. And so it's kind of come around to the point where there's certain people who are started to deduct for over-restoration, but I don't think it's waved around as a threat for restorers to remember that let's not over-restore these cars. So we're constantly changing the goalpost or the bar to figure out what is a good car, but we are trying our best to come back to terms and say they don't have to be perfect, because they weren't perfect when they came. The other problem that we have is that these cars are not. When the Ferrari was new, any of these cars were new, they were $10,000 cars, a lot of money back in the 60s. But now that same car is worth $250,000 or $500,000. Well, people have a certain idea of what a $500,000 car should look like. And so you can't paint it like with crappy paint and, or just try to make like orange peel and say that's the way it was. It's like, oh, it's still got to look kind of like, so there is a certain level in which people want to make it look good. So it's constantly, I don't know if I can answer that question specifically.
Yeah. No, it's a balance, right? Yeah. And it's a varying balance.
Sure.
Yeah, that's a good point. And now Doug wants to hop us in his time machine and bring you back to the beginning, Tom. But before we go there, I love this line of thinking right here, talking about the restoration process and what attention to detail. We talked about this a little bit before, but on your website, you go into these, you have these little vignettes, these little stories, your writings and pictures around what you look for in the process and how you look at the supply chain and source parts and products that you need for your car. And I would urge listeners to go and check out where you talk about the interior of a car, which is really something, you don't think a whole lot about. But once you get into the car, you think about the leather, you think about the carpet, you think about the dashboard and all of these surfaces around you and what it takes, the hides of a cow and the quality, and does the grain match? Because it takes a whole lot to do the interior of a car. And there are trade-offs between, all right, are we going to treat this leather, not treat this leather? If we treat it, will last longer for an application like a car, but will it take the stain the same way between hides? So, I don't know, just a thought. When you go down the rabbit hole and think about that, I guess it goes back to what Doug was saying. It's a trade-off. When do you know, when you talk to suppliers, if you've got the right one, or you just keep moving?
Yeah, I mean, we are constantly looking at good suppliers. There are people who study this stuff. I mean, and thankfully, it's like we have specialists. It's like I look at the guys who are really good at leather. They live, drink, sleep, eat leather. And those are the guys that you want to have conversations with. It's like the painter. There are guys who are really good painters that's all they do. They just look at paint.
Yeah.
And that's who you try to surround yourself with and have conversations with, where you're not sounding too demanding when you say, I got to get the leather to have this feel, or it's got to have this grain pattern, or it's got to have this thing. And they say, yeah, absolutely. I'll show you what I have. And it's that vernacular that you deal with when you're dealing with craftsmen. It's like, I tell people when I did the leather, there are people who say, oh, well, the leather, well, let's say back in the day when I did my interior, it was told to me that interior was $15,000. Okay. I was like, $15,000 for an interior? What do? They stuff the seats with gold? I mean, what is going on here? So I spent some time with my upholsterer, and when he showed me all the handwork and all the patterns and laying them out, you weren't just going to, to whatever, Scott Drake, and buying like an interior for a Mustang and just slapping it on there and stretching it onto the seats. You were literally taking the threads and picking out all the threads and taking each panel of leather out and then laying them on a cowhide.
Oh, wow.
And on a leather cow, on a cow, you get on that car with a 4-seater, it's 5 to 6 hides, 5 to 6 cows. And the reason is because a cow, when you think about the smooth leather, the back is the smoothest. The belly of the cow tends to be a little bit more puffy because it's fat, and there's fat underneath the skin. So it makes the skin. Now, these days, they're printing leather on it, but there's still a certain amount of leather that has the shape of the cow. So the smoothest part is the backside of the cow. They're right along the back. So you want to take that piece and put it on the stuff that you really see, like the center console or the dash pieces or the big rear panel under, and then the rest of it you don't throw away, but you put on the side pieces you don't see as much. So you have to selectively lay these patterns that you've taken apart of the old one and cut them out. And then you have to look for scars because there's barbed wire. This is a natural product.
Yes.
So you'd get a scar, and you'd have to mark the scar to make sure that when you laid your seat cushion, the scar wasn't in the middle of the seat cushion. So you have to juggle things around. All that takes time. And so then you start to understand, okay, I get it, because it's like, that's what you're paying for. Now, if an upholsterer says, oh, well, if that guy's charging $15,000, then I need to charge $15,000. No, that's not how it works. Are you actually going to give me the quality that we'd put into a $15,000 interior? These days, it's now $30,000, but it's what I was so excited to share on my website, because we used to have this thing in New York. There was this company, a suit manufacturer or a sales. They said they had this motto where it was like, an educated consumer is our best customer. Mm-hmm. And I used to say that's what I wanted to show Ferrari people, was like, educate them to what you're paying for. You're not just paying Ferrari tax because it's Ferrari tax. You're paying for this because of the quality that you're paying for. And that's what I wanted to show. I wanted to show the craftsmanship. And like, that's what you're paying for. You're not just paying it because it has a Ferrari logo on it. You're paying for it because there's 6 hides that were cut out and laid and hand sewn and put in this thing piece by piece. That's why it costs that much money.
That's so good. Thank you for that. Yeah,
Yeah,
when it
sure.
comes to restoring history, the details matter. The details matter.
And
All right.
and celebrating those people who did it. I mean, I think that we're doing the same thing. The
Absolutely.
guy who did those interiors, you're trying to keep up with his level of craftsmanship. You study how he did it, and then okay, I see what he did. He cut this back, and I have to do the same thing. So you're just doing the same, following their
reverse
footsteps.
engineering.
Good point.
Yeah.
Good point. All right. So Doug wants to get in the Wayback Machine, and let's talk about your first car, Tom.
Okay, first car officially. I have a twin sister, so we had to share a car. Okay, so I don't know if I should count that because that was just the Aspen station wagon. Although nothing wrong with the Dodge Aspen station wagon, the Slant Six. Yeah. But my first my own car was a '66 Mustang Coupe, and so I was in high school and I bought my brother-in-law had an old '66 Coupe, and it was a plain Jane Mustang Coupe. It was an automatic, no air conditioning, no power steering, just a regular. But it was a V8, and I drove that all through high school. And basically, I think I didn't really hang out with him. I just was a gearhead. I would spend all my time fixing the Mustang, So I spent my whole high school career, instead of hanging out at the 7-Eleven, I'd be at my buddy's shop, taking stuff out or fixing stuff or all that other stuff. So I cut my teeth on my '66 Mustang.
Okay, going way back, and your parents were good with that. They had no fear about letting their son in a V8
my parents
Mustang.
were kind of, my parents coming from a Chinese family. It's like they wanted me to go and become a doctor or something, and I was always just messing around with cars. And I think I tell everybody that I'm the black sheep of my family. I have 4 sisters, and they're all older than I am, including my twin. And I'm the only one with just an undergraduate's degree. They all are doctors, lawyers, judges, they're literally overachieving Chinese family. And I'm the youngest, and I've only have an undergraduate degree. And on top of that, it's an art school. It's a Bachelor of Fine Arts. So if you want to disappoint your parents that was what I did. And the joke about it, when I joke about it with my sisters, it was but I'm probably the only one in the family that's having more fun than anybody else.
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah.
For sure.
But I managed to succeed. Too. Yeah. But the main thing about it was I think I took that work ethic and says, well, I'm going to prove them wrong and show them that I can succeed at a degree doing what I love to do, as opposed to the path that they would choose for you.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah. So Mustangs ran in the family a little bit, right?
A little bit, but I had the Mustang, and then when I got to college, I was still patching the Mustang together, and I think my first automotive realization was that I found a '65 Mustang fastback 4-speed car. And I said to myself, if I have to fix the floor pans on a fastback or a coupe, it's going to cost the same amount of money. But the fastback is always going to be worth more money. So I need to, as much as it killed me to sell the coupe to buy the fastback, I knew that the smart thing was to put the money in a car, because repairing it is the same. I mean, mechanically they were the same car, but I knew that a 4-speed fastback was going to be worth more money, even if it cost the same amount of money to fix it. So I ended up selling the coupe and kept that, and I still have that fastback today. Yeah. And it's proven wrong. I mean, proving me right. I haven't put much money in it, but it's I built the engine, and today it's like money in the bank.
Yep. And good memories too. Of course,
sure.
Way back. So I did want to ask you. So I think your daily driver is a 03996 Porsche.
So it's one that I use more often. It's my daily, believe it or not, because people ask me, well, what does a Ferrari mechanic drive? And I drive an Acura. I would say you need a car that's reliable and doesn't need any work ever. So I've always been a big Honda and Toyota fan of daily drivers. Good choice. No offense to anybody out there, but I always say, if they poo-poo the fact that I drive a Honda or a Toyota, it's my other car is a Ferrari, so I don't really not really worried about impressing anybody. But the thing is, I do definitely feel like it's being, in a way, I'm showing to my customers that I'm pragmatic. I don't need to, show off with an expensive car and charge you higher rates, because I need to keep the car payment up on my S-Class.
Right.
But my other car is a 996. I've always been a Porsche guy. I mean,
Mhm.
so I guess if we wanted to talk quickly about my automotive career or
Yeah,
journey,
please.
it went Mustangs. So I learned American pony cars. And then from there, after the Mustang, the fastback, I bought a Sunbeam Alpine, which is a little, British roadster.
Yeah.
And I kind of felt like it's my journey because I really was always like British cars. I thought they were cool, but I wanted to learn about them. So I found this great little Sunbeam, and I remember seeing one on school campus when I was in college. So when this one came up for sale, I was like, oh, I'll go buy that. So I ended up buying the Sunbeam, and then after the Sunbeam, I've always been into Porsches. So at one point, and one of my sisters, my overachieving sister, is a physician, so she had bought a new 911 and showed up all the other kids in the family. So we were all like, well, one of these days I'm going to get a Porsche. I'm going to get a 911. So
Yep.
another sister got one. So they had two Porsches in the family. And then I ended up buying one. But I bought one, of course, as the mechanic of the family. I bought like at the time, they weren't worth a lot of money. I bought a 72 911 that needed some work, but I paid $2,200 for it because that's what they were worth back then in the 90s. And who knew that they would go crazy in price? But I drove a 911 and tracked it and fixed it and got introduced to 911s and so the story with the 911 is I sold it for Ferrari parts because at the time I was in the middle of restoring the Ferrari, and Ferrari parts are expensive. So I ended up cutting loose the 911 and regretted it ever since. So about 5 years ago, I was looking at cars and I as much as I didn't admit that I would drive a water cooled car, I was really impressed with the 996, and so I bought it and I've been just loving it ever since. I mean, I wish I still could afford to have a 72 911, but the 996 drives. I mean, if I'd done the stupid things I did in the 996 and my 72, I would have been in the trees. The 996 is so much better stuck to the ground than the 72.
Agreed. Yeah, and so you just reminded me of a story, and I think you'll appreciate this about kids and school and achieving. So I was at a holiday party over the weekend, and I had heard this story, but I finally had a chance to ask the son. So the father had a 1992 964 Porsche, and he had told his son, maybe his son begged him, I don't know. He said, if you get into college and get a full scholarship, this car is yours. And the son did it. The son got the car. Didn't keep it too long, ended up selling it. He's like, man, I just keep kicking myself because it would be worth like 5 times as much as what I sold it for.
That's right.
And his dad's like, he had to learn. He had to learn. So it was a good lesson for him.
Yeah. Who knew? It's like it's like I kicked myself for selling the 72, but at the same time I still kept the Ferrari, so I think I did okay.
Yeah, and it's been took you about 8 years to restore it.
Yeah. No, I bought, and the thing is, I always tell people, I always tell people I was an idiot when I bought my car because I was probably the only idiot that would be willing to pay that kind of money because, at the time, $10,000 more would have bought you a running and driving car, but I didn't have 10 grand more, so I had to buy what I could afford. And spent, what I thought was only going to take a year to put it together, ended up taking me 8 years to put it together, and a lot of time and money. But at the same time, it's only now in retrospect that you look like you're a genius because the prices of these cars just kind of kept going higher and higher and higher. But I didn't buy it expecting it to go up in value. It's just that's what they cost. That's what I had to buy them for, and that's what I did.
Right, and it made your career, right? I think to quote you, it changed your life, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, that's the part who would have thought? I mean, it's like you buy a car and as hokey as that sounds, it literally changed my life. And I've had offers. I mean, now the market has gone up and it has calmed down a little bit. It's gotten a little softer, but I remember having dinner with my wife and daughter, and I'd come home and okay, guys, I just got offered $150,000 for the car, and my wife, oh, we don't need to sell it. It's okay. And then like about a year or two later, I was like, okay, guys, I just got $250,000 offered on the car.
Wow.
And my daughter at that time was probably 8 or 9. And she's like, oh, you can't sell that car. I wanted that car. I love that car. And I was like, Ellie, one day when you're old enough, you're going to understand what $250,000 actually is. It's just like, it's just funny when those kind of numbers start coming up, and you never expected it to do that. So as the market starts to soften, and the car value, you start losing value on those cars, it can happen. I don't regret it, because it never was about the value. People get so upset when car values go down. And I look at them and I ask them, it's like, the car that you loved in your garage didn't all of a sudden become 20% less enjoyable. I mean, it's still the same car. It's just the market that has changed. I don't understand why you're so upset about it. It's still a good car. So it's because people are focused on value as opposed to just what brings them joy.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, good point. So as we guide the podcast gently towards the off-ramp here, Tom, two last questions for you.
Sure.
Why are the Italians so good at design? what is it about their innate? I think you said genetics, which made me laugh, but I think you may be right. What is it about them?
Where did the Renaissance? I mean, look at the Renaissance. I mean, since the Dark Ages, since we've created a society where we no longer had to be farmers, and we had time to make things beautiful. I mean, it started in Italy. I mean, just that I don't know what it is. Is it the water? Is it the people? Is whatever? But it just they have this innate sense of design. You go to Italy, they dress nicer.
They do.
They don't do anything without thought to aesthetics. I used to say that, and I love German cars. But if a German car is pretty, that was by accident. I mean, like in the sense of like when you look at a gearbox and the way they put it together. Like if it's pretty because of the ribbing, it was just not. It was because they deal with it first.
Because the form follows function,
right?
Yeah.
But the Italians will just sit there and says, no, we can't. We got to add this. And you look at the way they put the casting, and they do that not because they have European engineering, but they still have this innate design sense, and I think it comes from just it's in their souls.
Oh, great answer! Great answer. Last question. Okay, so the way you learned from Francois Sicard, who are you going to teach? Have you ever given any thought? Is there? I know there's going to be some young buck. Yeah. Oh boy, Doug's on his way to your house with a push broom now, looking to volunteer for 8 hours for one question. For 1 hour of instruction, but it has been a question that has been asked and discussed among my friends, among people who have foundations that support this kind of stuff, who want to do it. I mean, it really has been this discussion, and it has been on my mind. Personally, it's tough because I'm a one-man show. So I do all this stuff by myself. Francois basically did too, and he was very generous to give me the time, and I should give back to do the same. And I have been doing it with a couple people here and there. But the issue is, if you have to find the right person, because a lot of I do get emails from people who says, I want to do what you do. I would love to do what you do, and I was like, well, what is it that you think that I do? Because what you see on YouTube and what you see in social media is me going to car shows and driving these Ferraris, these $1 million Ferraris, and having, wine and cheese at these places. What you don't see is when I'm laying under a car and I'm getting dirty and my hands are permanently stained from oil and grease. But I mean, not that I hate that. I love it, but it's what do people want to do, and to find the person that loves it to their soul, it takes some time, and the investment of that time, especially when I only have one person that can invest that time, it's a struggle. So I don't know, maybe the right person will come along. Maybe I was the right person to come along for Francois, and it just happened, but it took us 25 years to figure that I was the right person. So I don't know. I would like to try, but I also think that the reality of what we do might not be for all those people who think that they want to do it. Yeah, people like the trophy, they don't like the sweat.
Right.
Can't really have one without the other. But
right.
Great answer. Well, Tom, thank you so much for spending some time with us. I would encourage everyone out in listener land to check out tomyoung.net, TOMYANG.net. So much fun. You will fall down the rabbit hole. Tom's a great writer. And you know what I want to, do you have any t-shirts left, Tom?
I do. I'll definitely have to send you guys some. Thank you for
Definitely. Well, we're gonna.
for
Yeah, I think you say $16 plus a couple bucks for shipping.
Sure,
Now, I think
sure.
the prices have gone up, but yeah,
Yeah, I haven't really been pushing them that much. In fact, because everybody now has all these like setups where you could just hit a button and do it. I'm still packing them myself and sending them. So I haven't
love
really
it.
been
Hey,
Even better.
It would
But,
make it. Yeah, the vintage guy does it the vintage way. Are we surprised?
right.
We're not surprised.
That's right.
Tom,
Well, thank
it
you
was-
guys for so much for inviting me. This has been a lot
Thank
of
you.
fun. It's
Thank
been,
you.
great to
Our
talk
pleasure.
about this stuff.
Thank you. This was
Great.
fantastic. And listener land, you have just heard the high revving, low mileage, late model heard round the world, authoritative podcast on automotive nostalgia. He's Doug. Reach him at doug@carslove.com. I am Christian. Reach me at christian@carslove.com. Leave a review if you like the show. He was Tom. You know where to get him. TomYoung.net. Please follow, tell a friend. Check out our link tree, linktr.ee/carslove. I'm sure we'll see you at the next local car show, showroom, race trip, or concourse. Thank you for listening. Keep the rubber side down, and we will see you in a week. Take care.